Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by a Hockey Boy and Nate, and we're going to have a very in-depth discussion about this potential severe weather outbreak that could be occurring from later on today, Friday, all the way on to Sunday, and maybe even Monday. But before we get started, I would have to ask you to do me a favor, hit that like button down below, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications as well so you don't miss any of my content. That'll include videos just like this one, as well as live streaming on YouTube. We had our live stream earlier on this week, and we actually were the second highest concurrent viewed YouTube channel for severe weather. So that's pretty crazy, especially since we had 170 some live viewers at one point. So that just goes to show you that our severe weather analysis is it's quite strong, and people do agree. They come to this channel to see just that. But let's get straight into the Storm Prediction Center's outlooks here. We have our three slight risks for the next 3 days. The first one here, this is the day one outlook for Friday, March 12th. And you can see there is a slight risk here for the northern panhandle of Texas into western parts of Oklahoma. And then you have a marginal that extends from New Mexico all the way into north central and central parts of Oklahoma, southern parts of Kansas, all the way over towards the Springfield, Missouri areas, and to the north and the northwestern parts of Arkansas. You guys actually are in a hatched risk, so this is something to keep in mind too, that if you live in Lubbock, Amarillo, Plainview, and some of these other areas, you do have this little black circle with a lot of these dotted lines in the middle, and what that indicates is that is a hatched risk. And on normal days to where that hatched risk is not there, you would typically have just a 15% chance for hail over an inch. But now, because you're in that giant black circle, you now have the possibility of getting hail over 2 inches. So something to keep in mind there, that you guys may have large amounts of hail that could be falling in places like Lubbock and Amarillo. Not that that's any different of what happened last year near you guys, but still something to keep in mind, that you guys could have some very large hail. Wind, 15% in the areas that I mentioned before for the slight. So you would have a 15 or a 5% chance of getting severe wind gusts over 58 miles per hour, because 58 miles per hour is the severe threshold. So anything above it, you would have it severe warned. And here's the thing that kind of interested me today. We do have a 5% tornado risk, and I honestly thought they were going to keep it too, but I haven't checked the models for that area as of late. I knew there was good energy up there in the general vicinity of Lubbock, but I didn't really see anything to kind of give it a little kick to allow it so that it would ride along a boundary and be able to kind of sustain. So there wasn't really any point of initiation that I could find that could warrant a 5%. But there is a 5% here according to the Storm Prediction Center. So if you live, as I said, near Lubbock and Plainview, you guys need to go ahead and monitor the weather. But today's not the only day that you should monitor the weather. And personally, in my opinion, I think Saturday is the worst day. This is kind of like a warm-up for you. Saturday is a large slight risk here. You can see the marginal extends from Colorado all the way into Kansas, down into Oklahoma, and all the way down to the border of Texas and Mexico. But you do have this large slight risk here, just inside that marginal. Does not include New Mexico and Colorado like the marginal does, but the slight does include southern southwestern parts of Kansas down into western parts of Oklahoma, kind of into the western panhandle of Oklahoma to the northern panhandle of Texas. Same thing here, except you do not have a hatched risk for hail just yet. You could very well have a hatched risk for hail tomorrow. as well as a hatched risk for wind. But for right now, we're pretty conservative that you're going to have a 15 or 5% chance of getting hail over 1 inch. Same thing for wind. You have a 15 or a 5% chance for winds over 58 miles per hour. But this is the thing that, this is the reason why I said that this event actually could be worse than today, Friday. And that is because of this larger tornado risk that could very well be upgraded. Within the last few model runs that I saw last night, I saw it evolve and how the conditions in specific areas got really ripe, extremely ripe. And so, just one of those things where people are going to want to kind of monitor that, especially since no one wants to be impacted by tornadoes, but very well could be a 10%, maybe even a 10% hatched as time goes along here. And then day 3, you do have a small slight risk, a very small slight risk here on Sunday. It is right along the Mississippi-Arkansas border, along the Mississippi River, and then you have a marginal risk, a smaller marginal risk that extends from Tennessee all the way down to parts of Little Rock, maybe even just to the east of Little Rock, down into the Monroe areas in Louisiana, all the way up into north central parts of Missouri. Let's take a look at the models here for this event specifically on today, and we'll use the HRRR for Friday and tomorrow, as well as the NAM, or we'll probably use the NAM 3K if we wanted a higher quality. But we'll take a look at the precept type, get some timings out here for you all. So later on this evening, towards the afternoon hours, you can see some thunderstorms that begin to form just the north of Lubbock, or if not around Lubbock. So you can see right here, this is 20Z. So this would be about 2 o'clock in the afternoon for you all. These thunderstorms can just push on through and kind of just expand across the board here into Oklahoma. And you know, that's the reason why they have the 5% chance for tornadoes, because they think that these storms could become supercellular and could be able to just kind of form along and move into Oklahoma. So if you get an outflow boundary and a storm that forms in Lubbock and stuff like that, more thunderstorms can form that way, and it can just scream off and eat up all the conditions there that was left from daytime heating. But later on the evening, pushes on through, and you have more of a consolidated line, but still with scattered thunderstorms. So something to keep in mind with that. I do want to go over to the 6Z real quickly, so that way we can have a 2-day forecast out. There you go. So thunderstorms move on through, and then by Saturday morning, there's still some convection that moves up towards the north of Oklahoma, but by then, that's when the risk kind of just dies out for Friday. So that's when Saturday comes in, and you can see this low pressure system begin to form these line of storms, and you'll see how that'll continue to evolve. This is right around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you'll see more thunderstorms begin to initiate. They'll begin to push off and form more and more thunderstorms that actually extend all the way down into the San Angelo areas. So something to keep in mind with that there are multiple thunderstorms. You can see how it has just these yellow dots in its own specific areas, so you can have multiple supercells within a line, and that can continue to move on through, push off with strong gusty winds, very strong gusty winds, large hail for sure, as well as a chance for a couple of tornadoes. Some may even be strong, so something to keep in mind with that. Temperatures for these areas, it's not too impressive, but you know, Friday evening you can see around the areas where thunderstorms would typically initiate, they're like mid 60s into the 70s. Same with areas in Oklahoma, they're in the 70s. And then as they push off and make room for the next day, which is Saturday, you can see how it's in the 60s in Oklahoma, but then you have some of these areas down here that are in the 70s and maybe even 80s in some spots. And that's where you have to watch too, where there's the most moisture and where it's you have the most convective available potential energy to be able to create thriving supercells to push off and utilize that energy to produce severe characteristics. But yeah, you'll see the temperatures will stay strong and all the way up until the thunderstorms form, and it's 70s in the middle of these storms near Wichita Falls, or at least heading towards Wichita Falls. 60s up into Oklahoma, and it'll continue to push off through as a whole unit as a cold front. You can see this cold front right here too, how it extends in a line. It'll continue to push on through and create colder air in the wake of its passing. Dew points, we can take a look here. You can see for tonight, if you're out in front of the line, like right on the border of Oklahoma and Texas, you can see that there are 60-degree dew points, which is very moist. You're going to want over 60-degree dew points to even consider thunderstorms to continue to materialize or even be strong and even consider tornadoes. But then here's Saturday evening, and this is something that I wanted to continue to watch here, is that you get some areas with more and more moist dew points into the mid 60s that try and climb to the 70s. And if you see that, that's when you know that you could possibly get some very strong supercells that can produce large hail, as I mentioned, gusty winds, and maybe even a few tornadoes. I want to take a look real quickly at the supercell composite. It takes all these conditions into one so that I may be able to watch and see what goes on as a whole. I can take soundings, I can click it, and I can be able to just figure out what's going on. Okay, so here's Saturday. No, I'm sorry. Here's Friday evening, and that's contaminated sounding. Let me find a good sounding here for you all. And here's a decent sounding. So just to break down what I'm looking at here, this may look like a bunch of squiggly lines. You just, as soon as you look at it, you're like, all right, Nate, I'm done. You haven't sold me on this one. Let's just get on with the video and just tell me if there's gonna be tornadoes or not. Well, I'll break this down for you all. If you can imagine a satellite looking down at a guy with a weather balloon, if he launches that weather balloon, it goes up, down, around, does a couple loop-de-loops or whatever, and it records, that satellite records the conditions around it, like temperature, dew points, all sorts of stuff like that, as well as where it goes. So does it go up and down, left and right, stuff like that. It records that path. So when it records that path, it forms into a hodograph, and the hodograph can determine if you have tornadic potential or not. And in this case, because the tornado, because the hodograph is veering off to the right and curling, that generally creates spin in the atmosphere for supercells. And so that can actually be indicative of tornadic potential. And indeed, you can see in the possible hazard type, this does agree in saying TOR is short for tornado. So this hodograph checks out critical angle of 94, which is very close to 90. So that is a really good hodograph there. But let's take a look at the CAPE amounts here. And CAPE isn't too strong. It's forecasted to be above 2,000 joules per kilogram. But that's still something to keep in mind. CAPE, for anyone who's new, is short for convective available potential energy. It's the amount of buoyant force that is measured where warm air rises and cold air sinks. The displacement of that is measured in CAPE. And so if you have more CAPE, it tends to mean that you will have stronger, more robust thunderstorms. If you have less CAPE, then you'll have less robust thunderstorms. So typically you want 750 to 2,000 joules per kilogram to even consider supercells, which is just mature thunderstorms. But the fact that it is around 1,500 and is forecasted to be about 2,000, maybe even more than that, should be all right. It's not a lot, but it is quite a bit given the time of year it is in mid to early March. So Cape is not bad. Dew points are in the 60s. You know, as I said, you're gonna want 60 or above, so it's kind of right on the border of a yay or nay, but it has decent amounts of moisture. Helicity, which is just the displacement of winds in specific with specific heights, so at the surface and at 3 kilometers. If it is more displacement of winds in regards to strength, then it'll have a higher helicity. And in this case, you have a helicity of 385. That's the effective helicity, I believe, where the inflow notch would be. And you typically would want around 200 to even consider storms. So the fact that it has 385 in the inflow is pretty good. Surface to 1 kilometer is 208. It's right on that border of considering tornadic supercells. So that's also that also checks out too. Capping inversion, there's a little bit of capping inversion, but sometimes you do want a little bit of capping inversion if you want explosive thunderstorms that just form out of nowhere. So that's something to keep in mind too, that there is a little bit of capping inversion to possibly be able to create some rather explosive updrafts for that event here on Friday. And then the lapse rates, 6.8, 7.6, they're not bad, so they can create some large amounts of hail. And you also have a bit of a dry line here at 500 millibars, so that will also help create, or a dry spike I should say, that will help create larger amounts of hail, as these hailstones, how they actually form is you have updrafts in the storm that is just a rising motion of air. And so with that rising motion of air, it can actually hold up water droplets in specific heights in the sky. But once you go up a specific height in the sky, it gets pretty cold. So that those water droplets then cling on to these dust particles that have been kicked up by just wind in general. And they tend to form hail, or these giant ice chunks. And so the stronger the updrafts are, the larger and larger the hailstones can be, until they get to a specific a specific weight, to where they would just be too heavy for the winds to keep holding up, and then they just fall flat to the ground. So just an interesting tidbit as to how hail works, and why lapse rates are important is that the higher the lapse rates, the steeper the temperature drop off is, which means that you can have hail in more specific spots and larger hail in some specific spots. So that just basically looks at the updrafts and could tell you how strong they could be. And then we'll take a look at Saturday's event, and you can kind of see preliminary. This is at 17Z, so it'd be at about 11 o'clock. You can already see there is already some ripe conditions. If storms already wanted to form, it already could. But oh geez, a bunch of storms just formed, and it just went mental. Okay, listen here. This is a bit contaminated, I will admit. Let's go out a little bit. Jeez. Okay, this is a bit better. So, let's take what we learned from the last sounding this Friday, and we'll move it on to Saturday. And you can see right here, the hodograph does veer off to the right, which means you are indicative of stuff. Stop. No, go away. That, for whatever reason, that notification, the notifications for all of my donations has been coming back. So I really don't understand why that's doing that, but you know what? It is what it is. So yeah, hodograph checks out. It actually says a PDS tour um, could be in the future here on Saturday, which means that you could have tornadoes around EF2 to maybe above, according to the HRRR here. Helicity is around 300, which is not bad. Temperatures at 71, dew points in the low 60s to mid 60s. Cape, geez, this is some steep amounts of cape. Surface cape is 3,475 joules per kilogram. That is a lot. A lot for this event, I should say. Typically, a lot would be around 5,000 to 6,000 joules per kilogram, and maybe even more than that. But for this event here in particular, I know this is Texas and all, so they're typically warm and crap like that. But this is a lot of cape. This is the first larger amounts of cape that we've seen this year. So that's something to keep in mind with that. Lapse rates 7 and 8.5 in some spots. That's something to keep in mind too, that there could be still larger hail that could form within these storms, and the updrafts are primed to be able to form larger hail. Storm relative velocity at surface of 1 kilometer is 218, so around 200 you can consider thunderstorms or supercells in general, and because it is above 200, that is a check mark for me. And the K index, we don't really mention the K index every now as much as we should, but it's just basically the higher number that K is, the more likely it is for thunderstorms to form. So if you get 30 or above, it typically means that you can get thunderstorms to form, and it's almost 40 here. It's 39, so that's something to keep in mind too. This sounding is also not elevated, so for anyone who has any doubts of this event, the low cloud level and the level of free convection is actually below 1 kilometer. So this could be a very serious event heading into Saturday, and we might actually have our first enhanced risk of the meteorological spring. And you guys may be like, oh, well, we've had enhanced risks earlier on this year. Well, meteorological spring starts from March 1st and continues all the way into the summer and I believe fall. No, it doesn't continue in the summer. It's right before summer. It's like the end of May, early June, stuff like that. And it's basically when Tornado Alley starts to get active. So now, because we have that, that's something to keep in mind too with all this. I'm taking soundings in other areas just to make sure that that sounding wasn't a fluke, and we do have cape numbers less than 3,000 in some areas, but regardless, it doesn't change the fact that the wind shear is still as strong as it is. So that seems to be a heavy factor in this event, that the wind shear is strong and that it will continue to be strong as it continues to move through. Real quickly, I do want to take a look at the southeast. The southeast here does have that slight risk along the Mississippi River Valley. The southern Mississippi River Valley and like Arkansas and Mississippi, as well as Tennessee and Louisiana. So that's something to keep in mind with that. And there's your risk right here. So it would be... it's kind of hard to tell because there isn't really a whole lot to say about this event. There's not really a lot of cape that moves on through. There's definitely not a lot of cape that moves on through, but the photographs are still interesting. So we might have a gusty wind threat on Sunday evening. So, let's see. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything else we want to do. I think that might be it. I'll take a look at these storms with the NAM 3K again. Just a general overview on Texas, just one last time. I also want to take a look at the supercell composite with the NAM 3K. By the way, the NAM 3K says the exact same thing the HRRR says, so don't fret if you're not seeing precipitation. I'm just taking a look at what this says for Saturday, and we'll take a sounding here. and it says the same exact thing, except the photographs are not the same. So that's something to keep in mind, that the NAM 3K is saying that the photographs from zero, the wind from 0 to 1 kilometer is a bit more elongated, but the wind from 1 to 2 kilometers is not as elongated. So still indicative of tornadic potential, but not as much as the HRRR. So that's something to keep in mind as it continues to move on through, and that lapse rates are still lacking a little bit in that department. But you still have Cape. It's actually forecasted to be around 3,000 joules per kilogram, and you still have dew points in the mid 60s. So you can't really complain a whole lot if you want tornadoes. But if you don't want tornadoes, then you definitely should monitor this event. So yeah, that's going to be it for me, guys. If you guys did enjoy the content, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, hit the notification bell, and share this with friends and family, especially people who live in Texas. I'll tell you right now, I will 100% be live streaming on Saturday. Okay? So, if you do not want to miss my live stream, please turn on the notification bell. And if you want to know what my live streams are like, feel free to look back at my previous videos, especially the one I did this past week. I can't remember what day it was because I've had a long week at work. I think it was... I can't remember, actually. So don't ask me. But it was earlier on this week. No, it was Wednesday. I'm sorry. It was Wednesday. It was Wednesday. So go back into that video. We actually are the only... I was surprised, too. We were not the only YouTuber, but we were one of a couple YouTubers to actually live stream prior to the event, so that way we can get the entire event in its entirety and make sure that people do not get impacted and do not cherry pick, because if you see tornado warnings and stuff like that and then you live stream, you're wasting time and you could be not saving lives. So but just to get back into the point of, we were a couple of YouTubers that actually began to stream the event. We actually had the largest view base for that day for streaming prior to the event. So we know what we are doing. Our analysis, if you don't believe us, is exceptional. But if you don't believe us, either feel free to watch some of the videos in the past or join us for Saturday evening. I'll have a more in-depth talk as to when I'll be live streaming, as well as what we can expect tomorrow for tomorrow morning's video. But tonight, I'd say it's a 50-50% shot that we could be live streaming, but honestly, I don't think it's going to be as big as it is. But then again, I could very well be wrong, so that's another thing too. But anyways, that's going to be it for me. My name's Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.